Yeah, I mean, this is really an extraordinary story. So basically what was happening is there was the fleet in the South China Sea, and there were U.S. helicopters going from the fleet to the embassy, picking people up from the embassy, because the airport had now been bombed, so everybody was leaving from the embassy, taking them from the embassy out to the fleet. This ship, called the USS QUİC, was monitoring the waters between the fleet and the coastline to make sure there were no attacks on the fleet. And what happened was, as all of these U.S. helicopters were heading out to sea, even though the South Vietnamese Air Force had disintegrated, they still had their pilots and they still had their helicopters. And so these pilots were jumping into the helicopters, filling them with their family, and chasing the U.S. helicopters out to sea, having no idea, no communication, no idea where they would land, if there was a place to go. They just, I mean, it was, you know, somebody described it like the Wild West. Instead of getting on a horse, you got on a helicopter. But in this one instance that you had the image of there, it was a Chinook helicopter, which is the two-prop, very large helicopter, and it was too large to land on the USS QUİC. And so they tried to shoo him away and say, you can't land here, but he was running out of gas. And it turned out that he had his family, his children on board, including his wife and his baby, who was 8-month-old, 2 years, 5 years old kids. And so what he ended up doing was hovering over the USS QUİC, about 18 feet above it. And you have to keep in mind the QUİC is going probably 7 knots through the water. He hovers above it. He opens the door of the helicopter and proceeds to throw his children out of the door of the helicopter onto this moving ship on the deck. And these crew members catch the 8-month-old baby, you know, the 2-year-old. I mean, it's unbelievable. And we have these photos and moving images of the sequence, and it's an extraordinary story and moment. But then, of course, he gets everybody off, and they remarkably land safely on the deck. But then he's still piloting this helicopter, and what is he going to do? So he goes to the starboard side of the ship, about 50 yards out, and he leans the helicopter over to the right, and he jumps out the left door. The helicopter goes crashing down. He goes crashing down. There's a huge explosion, you know, and the kids and the family and everybody on the ship is watching, and then there's dead silence. And 30 seconds later, the pilot pops out of the water, and there's just this huge cheer that you can hear from the deck of the ship. And they go out and get him, and they reunite with the family, and it's just an amazing story. Yeah. And I tell you, you know, this film is one story after another like that, these moments that none of us know, you know, in this country about really what happened.
My dad flew a Chinook helicopter in the South Vietnamese Air Force. He had been waiting for orders, but his captain had, you know, basically just left. So he and some other pilots picked out the best Chinooks and took off. He said it was the Wild West at this point. Just you and your horse, and you just do what you had to do to survive and take care of your family. He had given my mom a heads up that if she did hear a Chinook coming, to get ready. I was 6.5 years old. I can still hear the rumbling, very, you know, familiar rumbling of a Chinook. When you hear the Chinook coming, you know it's coming. I knew my dad was coming. In Saigon during my childhood, it was like, say, living in the middle of busy LA. So there's really not a big area to land the Chinook. So he came in and landed in a playfield. Caused a lot of wind, caused a lot of commotion. My mom grabbed my little sister, who was about 6 months at that time, and I have a little brother who was about 3 or 4 years old, myself. We quickly ran into the Chinook, and we all flew off out into the Pacific Ocean. My dad was afraid for not having enough fuel, afraid for a lot of things. He was just flying blind. And then he saw a ship out there.
In the middle of the day, after we had taken those first helicopters aboard, this huge helicopter called a Chinook, they came out and tried to land on the ship, and the thing almost crashed on board our ship.
This big Chinook showed up. There's no way he can land on Kirk without impacting the ship. He would have killed everybody on this helicopter plus my crew.
It was way too big to land. We thought that the helicopter would just fly away. But as the ship was moving forward, probably 4, 5, 6 knots, something like that, the pilot communicated that he was running low on fuel.
He opened up the port side of the helicopter and he hovered across the stern of the Kirk. Then all of a sudden, here comes a human.
One by one, we jump out. I jumped out, my brother jumped out, my mom was holding my sister, obviously very scared. And she just, just trustingly, just with one hand, with her right hand, holding on with her left to brace herself, just dropped my baby sister.
One fellow standing there, and he said he looked up and he saw this big bundle of stuff come flying out, and it was a baby. It was the 1-year-old baby. And then the mother jumped out and he caught her too. Then the pilot flew out on our starboard right side. He hovered with his wheels in and out of the water. He hovered there for like 10 minutes. And we couldn't figure out what he was doing. It turned out what he was doing was taking his flight suit off. And here's a man flying a twin-rotor helicopter by himself. At the same time, he's taking off a flight suit. How you do it, I've talked to helicopter pilots, and they can't figure out how he did that. How like a Houdini trying to get out of this thing. And finally, he made the helicopter roll to the right as he stepped out the door on the left.
Just thunderous, loud noise, the shrapnel just blowing up. Suddenly, just quiet. And he pops up, and he's alive.
And he swam away. And the helicopter was only about 20 feet from him when it hit the water. It was amazing.
We went out, picked him up. He was no worse for the wear. He was a little bit wet. Well, one unfortunate thing is he had some small bars of gold, which was all his worldly possessions, that were in his shirt pocket that sank. So he lost everything. He didn't own a thing but his underwear when he finally came aboard the ship. He was a tremendous pilot. The guy was just so cool and calm. We've so far taken a total of 17 helicopters. We ended up with 157 people aboard the ship.
That crew was very special. They took their money, went to the Navy Exchange and Commissary, bought all the clothes and food they could get, took it up and gave it to the refugees they befriended. They were unbelievable.
We laid mats and all kinds of blankets and stuff out on the deck for their babies, and there were infants and children and women, and it was a scene I'll never forget.
We were happy. My mom was just, wow. Symbolically, it was like, the first step onto not American soil, but American freedom.